it's a positive film. It has heroes and villains, and that it essentially is a fun movie to watch. It's been a long time since people have been able to go to the movies and see a sort of straightforward, wholesome, fun adventure.
Well, it's a fantasy. It's not science fiction so much as it is space fantasy. And it's about people. It's finally about people and not finally about science.
The story, when you actually put it into words, is only so much nonsense to hang a great visual experience onto. It's the stuff that fairy tales are made of.
It's sort of boiling down religion into a very basic concept. The fact that there is some deity or some power or some force that sort of controls our destiny works for good and also works for evil.
Marvellous, healthy innocence. Great pace, wonderful to look at, full of guts, nothing unpleasant. I mean, people go bang bang and people fall over and are dead, but, no horrors. A sort of wonderful freshness about it, kind of like a wonderful fresh air.
It's got whatever you want it to be. It's pure entertainment. It's like a roller coaster ride, and it can be interpreted as long as you enjoy it, which is the intention.
Hello and welcome to Generation Skywalker and the fifth instalment of our guide to Palitoy. In the first three shows of this series, we've already covered every Star Wars item released by Palitoy between 1978 to 1985. And in part 4, we discussed the evolution of Star Wars Palitoy collecting from 1985 through to the present day. All 4 of the previous guides to Palitoy are available in Generation Skywalker's back catalogue, along with our recently released interview with Brian Hickey discussing his book Total Star Wars Toys, The Palitoy Saga, which at time of recording is still being crowdfunded. So if you're listening before the 30th of March 2025, you should give the show a listen and head over to kickstarter.com and get involved with the project. If you're listening after that date, I'm sure Brian will have some excess copies to sell once all of the backers receive their copies in late 2025. In this episode, however, we are going to be discussing the myths, the legends and controversies that have grown up around Palitoy collecting. I'm Dan Burgess, and joining me once again we have Peter Lee. How you doing, Pete?
Evening, Dan. How you doing, mate? You good?
I'm good, mate. Good. And we've got Jon Aves.
Good evening, guys. Good evening, Dan. How you doing?
Very well, mate. And of course, Mr. Dave Tree.
Your quarterly Palitoy podcast. Coming at you from coast to coast like butter toast. Is always a pleasure to be here.
Very good. Like that. So before we get into the show proper, I've just mentioned Brian's new book, and we discussed at the end of our third episode that it would be great if someone did a Palitoy book. I suggested you, Dave, but you weren't biting. And wouldn't you know it, a year later, one is on its way. So question to everyone, what have you heard about the book? What's exciting you about the book? And most importantly, have you backed the book?
Oh yeah.
Oh, go on, Dave. There you go.
Everybody needs as much toy reference information as possible. You're never gonna get a definitive book ever on any of this stuff because it's so far down the line. So what you can do is as many different sources as you can get, back the book. It's worth every penny, and the more that back, it's already funded. So you're getting your book, but straight in there. The moment that email went out and the Kickstarter was live, I got in there, as I'm sure you all did as well. If not, we're done.
Jon, I'll take it you backed it. I've seen you popping up online about it.
Yes, indeed, I did. I was excited to hear about it, and the last one was great, but that wasn't purely on Star Wars, and this one is, so I'm quite excited about that. Yeah, I'm a Red 5 backer, so I'm sort of bit higher up in the backing, but not base level. So I should get all the little extras as well. I looked today and it's getting there. I'm really hoping we hit the second milestone to get that book in hardback. I don't want a paperback. I want a hardback. So I think we're currently at about 40,500 euros. Got to go up to 48, haven't we?
Yeah. I think most of these things, they do most of their business in the first and last weekend. So
yeah, I don't think we're not going to get to the very top level when you get that special box or something to cover the book. And they're talking about doing the book in extra high quality print.
I don't know if you listened to my interview with him. He's going to be at Echo on the 29th Echo?
Yeah, I'm going to go and see him actually.
He's going to give it a good push there, I think. So it might get some more people going because it hasn't really been advertised on Echo. I know they've tightened up some of their advertising rules. What about you, Pete? Are you in for it?
Yeah, absolutely. We got it back. So, I always thought we're well in need of it. Like, we've got all the Meccano books, DBP and POC. So yeah, very much looking forward to this. And yeah, as you said, John, we had Brian's book last year, but to have a full-on Palitoy one, or the Bob book last year. So, but to have a fully dedicated Palitoy version will be great. And, looking forward to see what he's got. He's got some deep dives into some black hole collections. You might be surprised to see what we see.
Definitely.
Prototype Death Star, was it? Interesting.
Yeah, the prototype Death Star, there was some tooling stuff as well. And I know he's gone around quite a few nice collections. He was talking about some Action Force items on there as well.
Nice.
Dave, I don't know if you listened, but he's, that was it. Yes, it's true offer. Apparently someone's got a big, I think you said it's 2 foot by 4 foot size poster of that. And so that'd be interesting to see.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
But I did tease you guys. I think it was last week I said to you about I've got an idea for episode 6. And it is linked to the book. It is linked to the book, but let's get to the end of the show and then I'll let you know what I'm thinking, and you can tell me whether or not you think it's a good idea.
I think it is.
You don't know what it is yet. But anyway, let's crack on. So, in the spirit of the Palitoy puzzlers that we discussed throughout the episodes of the Palitoy Guide, this episode is dedicated to more collector-based scandals and mysteries that are linked tangentially to the closure of the Palitoy factory. We're going to cover 3 subjects in this episode: the myth, which is the Palitoy Landfill, the legend of the Grey Limbed Stormtrooper, and the scandal of Toy Toni. So first up, we're going to talk Palitoy Landfill. So Pete, can you give us a bit of background into that and what the story is?
Indeed. So yeah, rumor has it that truckloads of overstocked and unwanted Palitoy Star Wars toys were dumped into landfill towards the end of what we know now as the vintage era, so mid kind of 80s. There are, sort of looking at this online, there's quite a lot up there. A lot has been written and said on this, but there's meant to be 3 different landfills, all in the sort of Colville, Leicestershire area. One that seems to come up time and time again is sighting Lounge, which I Google mapped this earlier. It's 6 miles north of Colville, so we're right in the firing line up there. So, I was previously aware this, I think it had come up a little while ago, but there was so much coverage online. You do a Google search, get tons of it. So even from collector sites, as you'd expect, like Facebook, there's a long thread on the Star Wars forum. Even the Leicester Mercury, as you'd expect, local paper has got it. Telegraph's even got a piece. Channel 4 documentary was going to be made at some stage. It was quite a fun trailer you can dig out on YouTube, I think that is. So 2016 to 18 was when it seemed to first come up kind of publicly. I'm sure it was talked about much before that. And again, around 21, it came up as certain housing developments were being built in Colville, and probably people thought going over the tarmac landfill with more houses, etc. But it's all gone very quiet since then. I think there's probably some truth behind it all. You dig through it, and there's a lot of people who suspect are in the know, but throwing red herrings out there. So whether people do know, who knows? But I think without doubt, there are toys buried there. Overstocks, faulty toys. Who knows? I work in book publishing, and we have to pulp overstocks. It's just a matter of fact. It's industry, everything has overstocks and faulty books. You get print runs that go wrong and you just have to ditch the whole lot. So it would have happened in the toy the toy game as well, especially manufacturing to that kind of level. So it is an absolutely fantastic story though, but who knows? There's also mention of like HS2, which is now under construction, whether that's going over where these sort of landfills were. And Bob Breakin even mentions that the A42 has gone right over one of them as well, where there's the service station up there. So, who knows? It's a great story. There's a potential dream that there is some there, but I think if you actually got someone to agree to do it, you'd be, I don't know, it'd be impossible, wouldn't it? I think the councils wouldn't let you do it. Even the landowners would be suspect of doing it. And even if you managed to get the right spot and you got down deep enough, what you're going to find, you might find some interesting stuff, but I suspect you would just find like some soggy rebel transports, right? I don't know. Who knows? It'd be interesting. But what does 40-year-old plastic look like? It's going to be rotten. And the plastic.
Oh, that's the question. Dave, look, you gave a knowing laugh then. Is there, do you know much about this? You've got your finger on the pulse of Palitoy. What do you know?
No, I mean, it was just like the people throwing out red herrings. That makes me laugh because and of course I'd say this if I was like throwing out a red herring. But like, honestly, in answer to your question, Pete, what does 40-year-old plastic look like? It looks like the plastic that's on your shelf now, because this stuff does not deteriorate quite to the same. I mean, we've all seen threads. We've all, maybe even experienced people finding stuff that was in your parents' garden that you lost. Yeah, it's discolored and it's sort of like, had the elements wear at the edges of it. But for the most part, plastic doesn't really decompose to the degree. I mean, there is a reason why we're on the highway to hell environmentally, because these things, dinosaurs died to give us Star Wars figures, they're not going anywhere. But my personal belief is twofold. Number one, that when these things were disposed of, it probably wasn't like the older, it makes an amazing story, an amazing fantasy, but I don't think it was like warehouses full of completed stock. It was probably like parts assembly that we don't have the correct number of Millennium Falcon shells to
Millennium Falcon one.
Yeah. So it's useless. Get rid of it. Yeah. Cause like where Pete's talking about pulping, you're absolutely right, but you're pulping things that are delisted or returns, or is done as like publishing schedule. But like within the toy company, you're manufacturing, you're assembling. So it's not going to necessarily be complete stuff, because anything that is an equitable worth, you're just trying to get, even if it's pennies in a pound, you're trying to get rid of it. That's why, the most obvious one with respect to Palitoy is that you could see carded Newtons for sale in the Entertainer right into the 90s, even though Palitoy ceased to exist in 85 and that product. But like, 15 years later, 20 years later, those things were still being sold on the peg in toy shops. So anything that had an absolute worth, even as ridiculous as it was, it probably was being booted out the door. Also, Palitoy didn't just make Star Wars. They made a whole plethora of stuff. So we always go on there. It's like, it's going to be carded caseloads of Boba Fett's. It's like, no, you're going to find it's like everything else as well. It's like, at that point in time, Care Bears, Action Force, they were making a lot of other toys, a lot of, rebat badge stuff like, Tomy related bits and pieces that, electronic games, circuit boards, board games, and it's more likely to be parts. It's more likely to be just stuff that you wouldn't necessarily be able to identify. It's not like, caseloads. But like my third point, Pete, when you get your books pulped, do you know where they end up?
The paper, I guess is recycled. I think that's the kind of industry standard that the paper does get recycled.
But do you know where it goes?
No. Exactly.
Yeah. So, just because there's a landfill, or several landfills in those areas, unless you are 100%, you're delivering it there yourself. And I say this because I have been involved with disposal of what was, in the mid-90s, mid-2000s of prepaid gift cards. So the ones that are like plastics, there was like, tens, hundreds of thousands of these gift cards that need to be disposed of. And I had to take it to a specific place to get them, you know, and it was weighed in, and then it was then shoveled off, and I had to fill out all the paperwork for it. But where that ended up, I have no idea.
I'll add to that, Dave. So back in the early 90s, possibly the late 80s, and I mentioned a few times about my dad being a lorry driver.
Yeah.
Right. So he used to have a contract with WEA, you know, part of Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And they used to have a little, it must have been for all their returns. I think it was in one of the industrial estates around the back of Norfolk somewhere. And we used to go there in his lorry, load up 26 pallets of broken records, CDs, videos, all the returns from the shops and other stuff that they deemed unsellable. And we would have a security guard with us, and we would drive to a landfill site. We would push all this stuff off the back of the lorry. They would then run bulldozers over the top of it, and then we would be allowed to leave. And I did manage to nix the stuff. I must admit, but I think stuff like that can be resold. I mean, because what's to stop someone who's got a lorry load of dolls or Star Wars toys filling up on the side of the motorway and open the back doors and go, right, make a few quid.
Well, I'm sure that did happen. But yeah. You actually went to the landfill site itself?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I imagine it's because of the quantity as well. You know, you're talking bulk stuff.
Okay. So I take back what I was like saying there, because I was like going, well, where I had to go was like a depot, and then it got, you know, where it went from there, I have no idea.
This went straight into the ground, and you see they have, I mean, it was a curtain-sided articulated lorry, it wasn't like a tipper truck with a back raised up and it all fell out the back. We had to, you know, either forklift it off or push it off the back of the trailer. Good fun when you're about 13 years old, at destroying things like that and smashing records. But yeah, they bulldozed a lot, and the security guard had to sign to say that he witnessed that.
Oh yeah.
It would have been different. Mid 80s, it would have been different. It wouldn't have been as...
Well, it's only a few years earlier than that. It would have been late 80s, early 90s, it wouldn't have been a million miles away from probably when they were doing it.
Wouldn't have been as controlled then as it was for the...
Well, the only other thing I was going to add to that is that this is all on the assumption that everything was held in Leicester, which it wasn't. Yeah. You know, a lot of stuff was distributed out of Newport in South Wales. So again, like, we cling to like these great myths, and we cling to like the romanticism of like the story and stuff like that. But the cold reality is probably very different. And yes, there have been E.T. Atari games died up in the desert and things like that. But that was because that product did not sell. I don't think that's necessarily the case here, because product was sold beyond like Palitoy's demise. It's probably more likely parts and components and things like that.
I think the other thing that's unique about that is it was buried in a hole as a, you know, it's dug specifically for those items, and that's all that was in that hole, as far as I could see when I've watched, I think there's a documentary on it. Yeah. Whereas this stuff could have just been put in a public landfill and other, you know, household rubbish thrown on top of it.
And the video game market in the States crashed phenomenally at that time. So like, you know, Atari, ColecoVision, LeisureVision, Intellivision, all of those sort of like gaming consoles. We didn't have that over here. You know, we were doing our own thing with like Amstrad and Spectrum and, you know, home computing. But like in the States, that whole industry crashed. The toy industry's never crashed.
No.
If you see what I mean. It's always
just burying something in sand compared to burying it in a load of other rubbish and muck and rain and God knows what. It's going to survive better. Sand's almost a preservative, isn't it? You're going to end up with that complete product coming back out of the ground, essentially.
And it would have ended up through market stores. Like you say, it would have just filtered through different levels of marketplace, wouldn't it? And just, and the bargain toy shop obviously would have then gone on to markets. Because I remember I got my Mukane Jawa doll, and that was from Sutton Market, and that was a £5, and a guy just had shipping boxes full of them. And it's just where that all ended up, just onto the remainder market, basically.
As someone who works within the toy industry, like, it doesn't matter how cheap stuff gets reduced down to, they will sell it some way if they can. And probably the biggest example that everybody can relate to, because you don't ever see it being like a hot seller that as that product comes out, you got to buy it straight away because you know that there's a massive market for it. But it's a market that is there, that sells consistently, is jigsaw puzzles, right? Nobody runs out the door to buy a jigsaw puzzle, but like jigsaw puzzles, probably the product that every toy retailer has that they've never paid full price for, because there's always clearance lists. And, you know, you see like jigsaw puzzles being sold in pound shops, and you see them being sold in Harrods and things like that. But like, it's very rare that you ever do myself out as a sale here, but it's very rare that anybody ever pays like the going rate for a jigsaw puzzle, because there's always like clearance lists. And it's a bit like Pete with the pulping, you know, there comes a point where they're just like giving these things away, you know, and you know, and you can see how many thousands of units are left. You know, and no joke, I've had one this week from Ravensburger, but there's Truffle, you know, there's all different like brands, and they will just sell it and get whatever they can for it after a certain point, because they're making way for new stock and things like that. But it's very, very rare that anything, if it's a sellable product,
it's
very rare.
Secondary markets and
they'll buy whatever it is, you know, they don't care. They'll buy pallets of clearance stuff, and they will stick it out for a higher price, and it will just tick through. There's no rush, because the profit margins they make on it, you know, just don't matter. And that's why I'm a little bit skeptical about it, if I'm honest, because it's like, nah, like if there's money to be made, like, you know, all of these guys would have been on it.
Businesses like that, I imagine, would have always been sending stuff to landfill, you know, like you say, incomplete, you know, just the rubbish they had coming out of the warehouse, just in general stuff would have got put in a landfill. But this sounds like if this is a real thing, and there's a hole in the ground with a whole load of Palitoy stuff in it, this would have been a more concentrated effort. And I think on the third episode, when we talked about the closure of the factory, or the end of the Palitoy brand, it wasn't actually the closure of the factory. That didn't come for several years later, into the 90s. So do you think that this would have happened it wouldn't have, just because Palitoy all of a sudden was called Kenner, they wouldn't have necessarily taken all the stuff out of there, they'd have started throwing it into the ground. Could this be related to the actual closure of the factory itself, and a clear out of whatever they had in the back room? A tax write-off or whatever, however they saw it.
So you got to be, if you think of like all the different brands and all the different product lines and stuff like that, you're talking hundreds of different product lines, and it's of that time, because there's a reason why there's no like deluge of 30 backs Star Wars figures, because that was the first product to come out. So then everybody bought those, and then it was superseded by the next card back and the next card back and the next card back. It's going to be the same for this, you know, all that product would have sold through at that point anyway. What you would then have is maybe, you know, Power of the Force 2, Tri-Logo stuff. If there's a chance that it's like Star Wars, which I'm saying is, you know, percentage wise is probably quite low, but I don't think it will, you know, part of me just thinks like, no, and I draw that from my experience of both manufacturer and also within toy retail, that it's just kind of like, it'll be odds and sods. It'll be things that like literally, what am I going to do with a load of Girls World cones? You know, you know, there's the, you know, it's like, oh, you're still trying to peddle that shit. You know, like just get rid of it. At what point do you say, look, just bin it, just get rid of it? And if I'm wrong, and if someone out there knows this stuff, that'd be great. You know, there's nothing better than actually someone coming forward with the information to say, well, actually I was involved in this and stuff like that. The only example I know of from Palitoy of something that was destroyed, right, was the Revenge of the Jedi posters. And there was one of the marketing guys, he told me that he literally had to get a Stanley knife and he had to like diagonally rip through all these Revenge of the Jedi posters that were lined up to be given out, because the name change came along, and he just joked saying that, like, my God, if I like literally kept, and he was like saying, you know, there was like reams of these things that he literally had to Stanley knife through, but would have been worth 100, and I just said they would have been worth that in isolation, but if you literally had about 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 or whatever of these things to like slice, then probably not. You know, I was just trying to make him feel better. But the truth is that's the only example I know of where someone said, but that wasn't even like at the end of the line. That was like a change in branding. There's like, no, we gotta bin those.
Did we talk about Woolworths? Did we talk about that on this show? That Woolworths had a deal with Palitoy for all their clearance, but that's why you get all the special price sticker stuff.
We didn't cover that. No, we didn't cover it.
Yeah. But that's a good example of that, because, you know, we always go on about the figure packs for Woolworths. So at that same point in time when they were doing the Star Wars stuff with Palitoy, they did He-Man and they did Action Force as well.
What do you reckon, John? Should we go and get a couple of shovels and head up to Leicester?
Yeah, why not? Why not indeed?
I reckon, there's a quadruple Euro Millions rollover this weekend. If I win it, I'm gonna pay off all your mortgages, and we're gonna go and rent a little place up. We're gonna grease a few cameras. Yeah, well, we won't have anything else to do. I mean, the idea of it is a lovely idea, isn't it? But I think, yeah, your heart says one thing and your head says something else.
Mm-hmm.
It would be great if it was, you know, there is a pot of gold buried up there somewhere, but yeah.
I think what you gotta do is test the waterways, right? And literally like do some water samples of all like the local streams and rivers, because all of that stuff leaches through, you know.
Sniff out the TIE fighter pilots.
It's true. It's true. All of this stuff leaches through, and if you can find certain compounds that are directly, you know, you can trace back to plastic toys or whatever, then you work out where that water table, you know, where that drainage basin is, where that's coming from, to then end up in that waterway. And then that's probably easier than trying to like dig up random holes. That's probably how you'd find your yak faces, your wheelie bin full of yak faces.
Very good. Any more thoughts on this landfill? And I think we've done enough daydreaming, and it'd be great if it was real, but yeah, it sounds like it's a bit of a pipe dream.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little story though, you know, you never know, but.
It'd make a great film.
Yeah.
Well, that was like the chap that I sent you guys a link a few weeks ago, the chap whose wife threw away his Bitcoin wallet, and the Bitcoin now is worth about 450 million quid that's in that, or is it, yeah, 450 million pounds. In that Bitcoin wallet, and she threw it away, and he's partnered with a hedge fund or some sort of company to dig the landfill up where this Bitcoin wallet is residing, they think.
Oh my God.
And again, it comes down to council permissions and all of that, but he's on for finding his Bitcoin wallet. It's no wonder when you're in the article, he's no longer with his girlfriend. I did chuckle at that bit, but yeah. He's trying to get his Bitcoin wallet back, but it's similar. That's what I'm saying. If we win the lottery, we'll just pay everyone off. We're going to start digging up Colville.
Yeah.
The man who claims he lost £4 million worth of Bitcoin will go down in cryptocurrency legend. James Howells says he accidentally binned his hard drive way back in 2013, and it ended up in landfill. He reckons the value of his digital currency has now raised to 500 million. And he's been going to extremes to find it. He's even begged Newport Council to excavate the landfill site and let him search there for the missing hard drive. They've refused. And then last month he announced he was suing the council for nearly 500 million in damages, a claim that they say has no merit and they are vigorously resisting.
Shall we move on to the Grey Limbed Stormtrooper then?
Do it.
We'll go straight into the interview now. I've got an interview with Lee Bullock. Now, there's a couple of points just to note on this interview. First one being that it was recorded over 2 years ago. So this interview was originally recorded with the intention of included in one of Jez's, those old fossil episodes that when we were doing the 3-figure focus at the end of the last one, we said we'd be talking about Snowtroopers. So I thought, oh, brilliant. I'll go and talk to Lee about those because I know he knows a bit about the Grey Limbed Stormtrooper. So we recorded the interview and it's remained on the shelf for the last 2 years, but you're going to get to hear it now. And the other point to note was I had COVID. I recorded this interview, so I do sound a bit worse for wear, and I think I'm a bit delirious from whatever medication I was taking because I do start referring to sliced noodles as Max Rebo, and so I don't know what I was on, but yeah, just try and see past that and take a listen. Hey, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you? You're all right, Dom?
Very good. And so, Lee, we're not talking 12-inch action figures today. These grey-limbed stormtroopers are what we're on. There's been lots been said about them over the years, and you appear to be involved with a lot of the thread going back to 2006. I found one, your name all over it. Can you give us a bit of your insight into what these are and where they come from?
These are PvP, for the most part, variant Hoth Stormtroopers. So they're usually the hard limbs with the country of origin scar on the back of the leg. And it's usually the hard styrene body, the hard ABS body. And I remember seeing them for the first time, about 30 years ago.
Okay. So we're talking 92, something like that?
Something like that, yeah. Early 90s. And they were knocking around a lot on various stalls at toy fairs. And over the years, I've seen them pop up here and there, quite a lot in the wild. And I'll come to that in a second. And they gained a bit of notoriety and infamy in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, where a lot of people were assuming they were fake.
Okay.
And that they were painted, or they were somehow had been messed with, they'd been modified. And so the lore, the history of these as has been kind of passed down as an oral history among collectors, is that these were rejected figures or overstock figures from the Palitoy factory because they had turned up on market stalls and car boot sales throughout the early 90s and late 80s.
So do you think that was the single person selling those, or were they just shipped out in?
No idea.
Okay.
No idea, but I know they were found in bulk.
Okay.
No, they were found in bulk. The upshot, so there's been a lot of controversy about this, and certain people had been saying that they were fake, and they were absolutely fake, and that they were being faked by other people, certain individuals, and all this, and so one time it was at farthest from, and a very well-known collector talks to me about this, and we decide to have a look at them. I work as a materials scientist, a materials physicist for a company that works on advanced materials, including polymers. So I have access to some equipment that could give us a little bit of insight. So I just started off with doing some simple tests. So I was boil and popping the limbs, and I was weighing the limbs, and the limbs were compared to a normal white limbed version were different weights. Now, if you're going to ask me what the difference in weight was, I can't. But I know the difference in weight.
Why not, Lee? Why not?
Because I don't have that much of an encyclopedic mind. So there were different weights. So what I decided to do was I had a hunch. And my hunch was that looking at these in hand, these were not painted.
Yeah.
These were not painted, but there was underneath the grey surface was white plastic. And it extended all the way through to the pin. So no one had sprayed this. I could see no overspray. The actual discoloration had extended all the way through to the pin that went into the body. So I decided that I'm going to try this. I'm going to try something. So my first idea that I had was this was some form of what's called photo-oxidation. And what photo-oxidation is the degradation of a plastic that has been forced and sped up by ultraviolet light.
Okay.
Okay? You can also get thermal oxidation as well. And what oxidation is the addition of oxygen to the molecule or the removal of electrons from the molecule. Okay? It's all oxidation is. And that does all sorts of, when you photo-oxidize or thermally oxidize a plastic, a polymer, that does all sorts of things to the plastic. You know, so things like what's called conjugation, what's called carbonyl, formation, what's called carbon cleaving. In PVC, for instance, you can cleave off chlorine atoms. And this will have the effect of changing the colour of the plastic, what's called the chromophores of the plastic.
And is that equivalent to what we see with stormtroopers going yellow? Is that?
Yeah. Usually what you tend to see, quite for instance, with the bodies, which are made of ABS, which is a styrene, basically it's made of 3 monomers. That also goes through photo-oxidation. Whenever you see this type of degradation, for the most part, it'll be photo-oxidation. Okay? There will be sometimes, particularly with PVC, that fungal spores can also grow in PVC and cause discoloration, which I think a lot of us have already seen that. Okay? There actually are fungal spores. So, Aspergillus fungal spores, you know, if anyone wants the actual, you know, version, you know, the actual genus of them. So, what I did was I figured I'm going to speed up this reaction. So I took an oven and I placed the oven at 100. No, it wasn't. It was about 60 degrees. Okay.
Okay.
So I put I took the lid off and I put it on a hot plate on the plate at 60, 70 degrees inside this lab oven. And I was making use of the fact that in chemistry, every 10 degrees you raise the reaction. Every 10 degrees in temperature you rise, you double the rate of the reaction. Okay? Yeah. So this speeds the reaction up enormously by doing this, by raising the temperature. I was able to force a change in the colour to get darker. Now we have a machine at work called a spectrophotometer, and I did some measurements with the spectrophotometer on the colour change between the 2 legs.
Yeah. And
there was a definite colour change. A delta of 13, which is, our eyes can perceive a delta change of 0.5, and this is 13, so that's quite a big difference. Yeah. So it was quite marked. So, and I was able to make that colour change in this grey reaction on the surface of the plastic. I had tried to swab the plastic with various alcohols and ketones and things like this, and solvents to see if this was a paint, it would come off with one of those solvents. Nothing came off like that. This was a reaction in the plastic. This wasn't a paint or an ink. They would have come off with the solvent. So this, as far as I was concerned, was a reaction to the plastic. Now, the question is what does this imply? What does this imply for those Hoth Stormtroopers? Well, that's open to conjecture. I mean, a good working theory, I suppose, would be that these were rejected as stormtroopers, snowtroopers, and that they'd already started going grey in the reaction. Because remember, these were injection molded, so they're injected at temperature. So they could have already started to discolour pretty much as they're being injected.
Yeah. Did you? There was a cut. I don't know if you were there or if you heard it. The Palitoy panel a few years back, 2015, I think it was. And the guys on there, they were kind of saying, oh yeah, they're hard copies. We recognise those. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, they're not hard copies because hard copies are made of either Carbolon or Dynacast, polyurethane resin. I mean, I think they had a thing where they seemed fairly sure that these were pre-production plastic mixes.
Yeah.
And that they were dumped out, that they were rejected, which is where you're probably getting some of this working theory from. I would say that even Palitoy employees could be misremembering.
Yeah.
And I think we have to bear that in mind. But if we combine that with, if they do remember this particular incident where they've had to dump out, thousands of these things, if we then combine that with where the history of these have turned up over the decades, then it's not out the realms of feasibility to argue that these were pre-production, in the literal sense, pre-production test shots. And they were testing the mix of plastic, and the mix of plastic wasn't up to standard. You've got to bear in mind that PVC contains all sorts of additives. There's additives, such as heat stabilizers, which are usually what we call metal stabilizers. And quite often back then they would have been made of cadmium. Okay. So this adds, stability to the PVC as it's heated, to the polymer as it's heated. And there's also phthalate. And phthalate are basically phthalate plasticizers. Now, the thing is with phthalate plasticizers is that they are free to move around inside the PVC. They're not bound to the PVC. So they can leach out. And we see this with the frosting on the PVC legs of figures and arms of figures and heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen it on, sliced noodles. So the arms and the head have just gone completely pale. I mean, when I first bought it, the one I've got now, I bought it 4 or 5 years ago. It had been up in a loft somewhere. It was bright blue, and within 6 months, they'd gone pale and the body was still really dark.
I mean, the thing is with the Rebos is that's not something.
I'll have to correct that in the edit, mate, because I mean,
fine. That's not so much the phthalate plasticizer, but that's just the pigment, which is also free to move. It's not bound to the PVC. Okay. So that's free to move, and that basically can volatilize straight off and discolor that way. PVC is not a very stable polymer. It's not a very stable polymer because of this. So I think it's entirely possible that they had a bad mix of PVC with the wrong levels of metal stabilizers and the wrong levels of phthalates in there. And there's been some sort of oxidation reaction that takes place on the surface of the lint. It's certainly not paint.
So it sounds to me, Lee, like a bad batch.
Yeah. Yeah. The bad batch. I can't believe that we did that. It's a bad batch of plastic. And I think it's an early attempt to get the production right. This is my feeling. No evidence for this at the moment, but it's my feeling. And it's as good a guess as any. It's an early attempt to get plastic right.
Because with the quantities that we're talking about, because we're talking about boxes and we're not talking about one or two. It must have been some sort of run, because if they were just testing a mold, they would have done 2 or 3 of these, then done the real thing. The fact there's so many of them would suggest what you're saying, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you've got to bear in mind as well that, it's always on PBP snowflakes. So if these were actually manufactured in Spain and were sent across to the UK for quality control, and their quality control guys turn around and goes, these are terrible. Yeah, dump them out. Do you want these? Do you want this box? Go take this box. And then someone disseminates them on car boot sales or market stalls and things like that. I can certainly see that happening. It's very hard to say what these are. It's easier to say what they are not.
Yeah.
And in my view, the ones I've seen are not faked. They're not painted.
Well, that's one answer. That's one question answered, right? That's the big one. So it's just the other two options then, isn't it? So do you believe the guys from Palitoy said they were pre-production, or we go down the route they were a bad batch?
Well, I mean, they could be both. They could be both. They could be the first runs that they got from the PvP factory. And, those first runs as a test run, they rejected.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't got the plastic mix right.
Yeah.
You know, that seems for my mind, that seems a fairly plausible explanation. I mean, what we would need to see is actually some actual written documentation of this. You know, angry lappers, you know?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of what I was reading a couple of threads, and a guy was describing picking them up at a sale, but saying they actually came with skirts and guns. Is that your experience with them, or have you just seen them?
Yeah, generally with skirts and guns.
Okay.
Yeah. Generally it's with the right PvP skirt. So with the holes not slits, and with standard Hoth Stormtrooper guns.
And the one that you baked, did you reassemble that, or?
I did reassemble it and give it back to the individual who had kindly donated it. He did know that this was going to come back a little rougher than he gave it, because it wasn't in great condition anyway.
Right, okay.
So.
Do you own one of these? Have you ever owned one, or is it?
I have owned one in the past, but I've gotten rid of it. I've sold it eventually, you know. But I've seen quite a few. Of these.
It's good. I don't think I've ever seen one in person. I've seen every couple of years it comes up, doesn't it? You know, someone posts a photo and all of a sudden there's a crowd of people that just go, it aggravates some people, I think.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And the problem is that misinformation travels faster than truth.
Yes. Hopefully we'll give people some more things to think about tonight, because it's been interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, like I say, all I can say is that from my perspective, from what I've seen of them, you know, the sort of playing around I've done with them, they're not painted. They've not been tampered with in that way. This is definitely a surface reaction, most likely photo-oxidation or thermal oxidation.
That's really insightful. I've seen people saying that, there could be something to do with the ATAT driver, because the ATAT driver's got grey arms and legs, but
the problem is it would be grey all the way through. If there was shot in that plastic, it would be grey all the way through. It's also unlikely, I feel, to be where they haven't cleaned out the injectors correctly. I think this is just definitely because of the way the oxidation, as we're assuming it says, appears on the surface. This is definitely where the plastic is exposed to the air, you know, and exposed to sunlight or heat. So that's generally what my feeling is of this.
That's brilliant. Thanks for that, Lee. Thank you so much for your time, buddy. That's been really insightful, like I say, and
No problem.
Look forward to meeting up with you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hope you've enjoyed that. Lee there, dropping some science on us. Some heavy science. I had trouble keeping up with it. Hopefully you didn't have the same issue though, and know your molecules from your atoms. Lee's theory on those is interesting, and I've seen it now a few times crop up, that people believe these are, or they were produced in the PPB factory. They were sent across to Palitoy to sign off. During the journey, they'd started to grey and they were rejected and somehow ended up on car boot sales around Leicester. How does that theory stack up with you guys? What have you heard about them, and what are your thoughts on them?
I mean, my bead on it's always been, again, it'll make another great movie. It's been a very sort of divisive subject. And from the get-go, I've always felt that I don't think that these are, that's not to say people haven't tried to fake versions of it. But I do think that for the legitimate ones that are out there that it was a real thing, because mistakes easily happen in manufacture. There was a thread that was on Rebel Scum way back when.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I was doing work for Hasbro, and I had on my desk, clone troopers that had been rejected because they had, burn marks from like the tool.
Fire.
Yeah. But it was almost kind of like the plastic was all, there was nothing wrong with the figure, but the plastic was all just kind of like, it was like had like these brown marks that you were just trying to like get through. And that was like tooling burn. And then I had ones that, and these, sent across from like somewhere in, Shenzhen, that was almost like ink marks, but it wasn't like a Sharpie. It was like literally in the plastic, and that was where they were just like flushing out and changing over the plastic pellets to then make the product. And I literally took pictures and put those on Rebel Scum at the time, and in one ear and out the other, because people don't want to kind of accept those things. They just want to like demonize or legitimize. And it was just kind of like, oh, you know what, that's fine. So I've always held a belief that like, yeah, these things do come about. The people that are assembling them are on minimum wage jobs. They're not Star Wars experts. They're just assembling. Does it fit together? That's fine. And you could be like 50, 60, 100 down the line before someone goes, wait, we got it all wrong. But like, you're not going to crack them open because you're then breaking the product. So like, get rid, start again. It goes on all the time. It goes on now, even with today's, high standards. You'll sometimes, you probably know of Wicked and the balls up Mattel had on that.
Yeah.
Right? So stickers were sent out to toy shops to like sticker over. But like Lego have done that as well. There was a calendar, one of the Star Wars calendars a few years ago, had the incorrect contents on the side, and you were supposed to sticker that up. Transformers, a few years ago, they did a Transformer called Spastic, and that had to be literally with a sticker called Overrun, but everybody wanted the Spastic one. It goes on all the time. So, I've always felt that, they're there, have people make their own fakes and probably try to palm them off. Yeah, absolutely. Because you got, bootleg weapons and accessories and stuff like that. So if there's a demand there, people will do anything.
But in terms of the history of them, I know I said at the start, we recorded that interview a little while ago, and there's obviously a bit more water gone under the bridge, and I've looked out for a little bit more and done some more reading for tonight. I mean, it definitely feels like there's a bit more of a consensus now. I mean, there's a great piece on the Variant Villains website under the Hoth Stormtrooper. It's quite a lengthy article about these. Lee actually contributed to it as well, but it talks about how in the PPB factory around this time, they would have been shifting over to doing their own manufacturing and making the figures themselves. And they were known to use the sprues off of one run to melt down and then produce the next. And in doing so, obviously the plastic that was being used wasn't always of the highest quality because it'd been melted down so many times potentially. Mm. And that kind of leans into what Lee was saying about poor plastic that's being output. I suppose the one question then is, did they make it over to the Palitoy factory, and were they disseminated out from there? And that would then, I suppose, lean into the fact that Palitoy were the lead European toy seller in the UK, and maybe they were test shots that were sent over and then rejected and somehow ended up in a staff shop or in the back of someone's van in a car boot sale.
You have like Action Force products sold with Star Wars weapons in them. You have, a lot of miscarded things, tri-logo miscards. You have, so there is no one perfect system. And when you kind of look beyond just that single product, I know we're talking like a Hoth Stormtrooper that could have been like from the 80s or late at some point from between 80 and 85, but there are kind of things going wrong all the time, and where it came from and where it ended up, you know that not everything's done in one place. For the most part, it's assembled in one place and then distributed out. There's so many, and all pre-computerized systems as well. It's no surprise that, these things and the melting down of the plastic, I personally don't think that was necessarily the case, purely because these things cost loads, and you don't want to screw it up. I don't think it worked. Were they using the same grade of, because you had different supplies of plastic, it wasn't like I want to use that particular paint. You got these from various different vendors. So that's why some things will feel heavier than others. Some things are bendy, some things are very hard in plastic and stuff like that. You got different vendors, but I'm
not convinced on that.
Well, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I don't think you can, it's like, oh, well, look, let's just melt that again and redo it, because within my experience of like injection molding, that doesn't really like happen, because you've got, these things are like beads, that are in a hopper, and then they go in and then heat it up, and then this stuff will, it's shot out at such a high temperature that it then cools the moment it hits the actual steel tool. I don't think you can kind of really have like this cauldron of like, oh, let's smelt down some other stuff. Bootleggers and stuff like that, absolutely. So like when you think of like, all of the kind of Polish bootlegs and things like that, because they're doing things differently, but like within an actual toy company, I don't think I don't think they got the time to do that, or they would risk doing that, because the machinery is cost, the investment in that is so big that you can't dilly-dally with that, and potentially cause a breakdown on it.
Have you boys got any experience of them? Any of you ever owned one of these?
I never really got involved with it, to be honest. Ages ago I heard Jason Joyner's name attached to it all, and I never really fancied it myself. I was interested in some of the recent prices. You asked for some valuations, Dan, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, they're vinyl right up, haven't they? They're vinyl Cape Jara prices. You're looking at over £1,000 for one now.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
But you just don't see them come up that often. I could probably count on one hand the number that I've seen just on the UK pages. I don't know internationally, but certainly on Echo and Jabbers and places like that, it's very few and far between.
Yeah,
see one come up.
No, I'm the same. I've not seen them.
But it does make me chuckle when they do come up, because there's those, I think those old stories about them being fake, and just people just seem to, get a little bit upset by them sometimes when they do it here. But I think if you look past that and then do a bit of digging and speak to people like Lee, and you kind of get a bit more of a nuanced view of them. I mean, he's obviously done a lot of work into them, and if, Lee, I love Lee to bits. I mean, you never look at him and think he was a scientist, but he knows his stuff. When he talks about 12-inch dolls and plastic degradation and stuff like that, you've got to pay some attention to it. He really does know his stuff. And I think if these were fake, he would be shouting from the rooftops that they were fake. So I think we can at least, put pay to the fact that they're fake. I suppose the question then is what they designated as. I mean, I would have quite liked one of these at the time when I was speaking to Lee, because I kind of had it in my head that they were Palitoy figures, but I don't think that's necessarily the truth either. Once you get past the fact that they've potentially come out of the factory, they are, to all intents and purposes, the Spanish version of that figure, and why wouldn't they have come from anywhere else other than Spain?
Yeah.
No, it's PBP variant, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that certainly makes them less desirable to me, although they're kind of Empire Strikes Back related. I think the fact that they're PPB is probably, makes them less desirable to me. So that £1,000 price tag, but I don't think I'm going to rush out to get one. But if I happen to see one in a job lot of figures that's randomly been purposely, I'd jump straight on it.
I missed out on a job lot of Grey Limbed Stormtrooper, a job lot of stuff that had a Grey Limbed Stormtrooper in it at Farthest From a few years back. And it was one of the sellers who was like, I've got a load of stuff. I don't want to take it home. I want you to, just give me an offer for it. And I was like, all right. And it was just like, not Star Wars. It was just like everything. It was like just whatever he had left in his loft. He was an old toy dealer. I was like, oh look, let's sort it out at the end of the show. He was like, that's cool. And then, because he was then selling stuff, he was then telling people, oh, well, yeah, have a look through this. I've got some stuff here if you want anything, have a look through, make an offer for it. And I can't remember who bought it, but, there was a Grey Limbed Stormtrooper in that lot.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, no way, that's really cool. And I'm like thinking, bugger, I should have just like sorted that out there and then.
Do you know what he sold it for? Or?
I think, I want to say 60 quid.
Okay.
So we're talking 10 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. And prices, I remember them being like, I don't know, is it COVID?
Something? Or?
Yeah, I remember when they were like 500 even, like around COVID time, but I think obviously there's not that many of them out there, and I think when they're changing hands now, they're going for big money.
Will Han Solo on his Tauntaun and Luke Skywalker in his Snowspeeder dare attack the Imperial base? Only you can decide. With Star Wars toys.
So let's move on to the main event then. So we've covered a myth, we've covered a legend, and now we're going to talk a scandal. It's been nearly 12 years now since the Toy Toni scandal broke, and Dave Tree's going to kick us off and give us a little bit of background about Toni and how the lid was lifted and he was outed.
Let me take you back to a time where we were all more innocent. And we took everything at face value and we weren't jaded. Everything was bright and full of optimism and full of hope. And out there, we used to buy Star Wars toys. We used to buy them not with photographs of every single angle, not with grading. We would buy them from a single line of text that you might see in an advert in a toy collector's magazine. Or you might see it on eBay and you would go, yes, this person is a real person and they have 500 feedback. They must be a trustworthy person. So I'm going to buy these things. For years, there was an individual who would be very open in terms of selling Star Wars toys. We refer to this thing now like it was like an insidious duplicitous plan that took place, and it wasn't really the case at all, because the individual, Toy Toni, his real name is Anthony Emshwitz, he was always advertising in Model and Collector's Mart. He was always selling on eBay under the eBay name, seller name of Masking. When you think about it. but M-A-R-sking, not M-A-S-K-I-N-G. And would also be selling occasional item in Snooper's Paradise in Brighton. He was well known and he was always selling Star Wars stuff. Now, it wasn't necessarily just these items alone. He would have a whole range of stuff, loose figures, complete figures, incomplete figures. He would have carded figures, and he'd always be advertising what he's got. I myself used to buy things from him from time to time, and I would ring him up. I would discuss what it was, and the price was agreed, and then I would send off a check and then get the item through the post a week or two later. Again, this is coming from a time that we did things differently. If anybody said, oh yeah, I've got a 12-back Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's on a Kenner card, and it's C7. And if you send me a check for 200 quid, I'll send it to you. You'd be like, no way. I'm not doing that. But, we did things differently. Now, so he was still is, I dare say, a toy dealer. He then had a website called Zuma Toys, and he would do tinplate, toys. So like, wind up robots, tinplate. And half of it would be like Star Wars stuff as well. So again, this wasn't someone who was like, hiding in the shadows, so to speak. He was quite open about it, but he always had like almost a bottomless supply of certain types of figures. So during the mid 2000s, which is when I started up all the cool stuff. I would go to memorabilia, chess on shows and things like that, and all the sellers would have the same figures for sale that you all knew came from Anthony Emshowitz. And it was always like, you know, Jedi carded stormtroopers, there'd be Boba Fett's, you know, and you just knew, just purely because they were pristine. These things were case fresh. They were perfect, you know, unblemished cards, clear bubbles, always, you know, and they'd sell, and then people would buy another one, and then they'd sell. So it was like, just like continuous supply of these things. And again, they were sold through Model and Collector's Mart, they were sold in Snooper's Paradise, they were sold via eBay, they were sold by ZoomerToys.com. And then during the sort of like last decade, or like Dan said, like 12 years ago, it started coming up on Star Wars Forum UK that there was a potential theory that these things were faked. And you had General Mills card, you know, a lot of German carded figures in there as well. And there was a lengthy discussion of, you know, going backwards and forwards, like saying, no, he's a great guy. He's always like provided, you know, done always a good deal and things like that. And to begin with, it was almost kind of like, no, this is ridiculous. This is almost like, you know, mudslinging, you know, not necessary and what have you. Until when Jason Joyner got involved in the conversation and was like saying, well, no, hang on a second. I remember this was a job lot of stuff that was being sold, of card backs. I've got this note somewhere. Give me a bit of time to find it. But I remember the deals and in between him, like looking, you know, posting this, everybody's like, no, this isn't true. This isn't real. But then Jason, who literally has, you know, he'll never throw anything away. He's got everything somewhere. He's just got to find it. He then found, the original for sale sheet, and it was literally detailing all this information of like the very same card backs of all the things that Tony was known for selling. So this then exploded into a huge like debate on like, you know, what's going on, you know, and very quickly within you know, Anthony sort of like then sort of stepped back and then wasn't like really like saying anything. But by this point, you know, it was out there. It was sort of like, you know, everybody was then sort of like putting two and two together. Honestly, everyone was fooled by it. You know, everybody just took it at face value because, like I said, now it's so easy to say, well, yeah, duh. But like, you know, we're not talking like today's sensibilities and with the detail that we go into these things. We're talking at a very sort of like more innocent time. And there was a lot of people that felt very betrayed. But what I will say is that the kind of character that, you know, fraudster that he's been labeled as, yes, it is the case, but like, he was never selling these for like phenomenal amounts of money. It was the people that were buying those and then selling them on.
Well, that was going to be my question, Dave.
And then getting them graded like through AFA, because AFA, again, an authority, and UK graders, an authority. But they weren't then going, yeah, that's not right. You know, they were just like, they were like ticking them through because, like, oh, we know that there's loads of these, you know, we're just going to get them an AFA 80 and AFA 85.
But going back to, just go back to, I mean, Jason's original post.
Yes.
It was loaded with bullets. And I'll just to break down that in a couple of ways. So the first, Jason indicates that a lot of people, he just thought it was common knowledge and people thought that it was going on. And obviously you mentioned there about sellers buying from Tony and then selling. Do you think that there were people that did know beyond, you know, Jason and Tony?
I don't. I mean, that's not to say that there were people who had been there and got out of selling stuff in between. But, you know, when you've got back at that point in time, people who had been around for a good chunk of time. So I'm talking, all the cool stuff, you know, popped into existence officially in 2007, but I was like sort of wheeling and dealing and stuff in 2005, you know, as in at shows as a seller and stuff like that. You had Darren Simpson, you had, Jim Stevenson, you had Carl Flattery, who were all, and, you know, with respect to Darren, still is, all dealers of high caliber collectibles. You know, they were massive. KFC, Carl, you know, so Carl Flattery, Jim Stevenson, you know, Mr. Star Wars, and Darren Simpson, they were all at the shows and selling stuff. You had other traders there who were like wheeling and dealing in vintage stuff. So like, you know, we said like Lee Bullock, you know, I was doing shows with like Lee, Gary Smith from time to time, Nick Roach. You had like lots of people who were coming in and, you know, dipping in and out, you know, wheeling and dealing, like trading to like build their own collections and stuff like that. No one at no point ever said, oh yeah, don't want to touch those. Everybody, because also at the same time, it wasn't the only thing he was selling. You know, he always had like loads of Meccano Jawas. You know, every Meccano Jawa just seemed to come from Anthony Emsworth. So it was mixed in. Again, it's very easy to go, well, isn't it obvious? But he was selling a lot of actual genuine stuff as well. So, you know, when you're kind of like seeing all of those things mixed in together, and like I said, the people that, you know, who are the hobby guardians of like the grading side of things, they should have spotted these sorts of things. But like if it even got past them, the people who are then inflating every single item by 200-300 quid just because it's got a number attached to it, then it kind of just like shows that, yeah, it got past everyone. Where Jason said, oh, I thought everybody knew. If I'm honest, nobody knew, because otherwise it would have come up in conversation long before that point. And Jason was not, although he was an event organizer and a collector, he wasn't from like the trading side of things that back at that point. You know, Showmasters was an absolute phenomenal juggernaut with London Film and Comic Con and things like that. Yeah. He wasn't necessarily
getting down and dirty with the trading.
Yeah. So he might have felt that way, but again, at no point did he ever go, oh, you know that those are all recarded or whatever. Because they'd be at every single show, you know, and at every single Collectomania and every single London Film and Comic Con, you know, because I was there, you know, as was Nick Roach, as was Darren Simpson, you know, as was Carl Flattery and what have you. But like, you weren't, you know, at no point was anything ever said. So it wasn't common, you know, it definitely wasn't, everybody knew, because nobody, it never have come up. And there's enough rivalry and camaraderie at the same time for people to like go around. Because at that point in time, you had like, you know, reproduction weapons still being freely sold, you know, and there was a turning point of like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't be selling reproduction weapons and things like that. You know, that's not really the right thing to be doing, you know, and people were going, yeah, I think you're right. Because, you know, they were being sold back then. For the record, I never did. I was 100%, but like
you're just ripping pop-up R2s off the car, babe.
Yeah. I love that. But you had traders like, you know, they would sell like the genuine stuff, but then they would be selling reproductions.
Yeah. And that was a few. I mean, I remember around that time going to Sandown, one of the Barry Potter shows, and a guy, you know, asking if he had any weapons. I think I'd gone through my loose collection at that point, so I joined the forums, and I remember going to Sandown looking for loose weapons, and I remember, oh yeah, I've got drawers of them, and they're all repro. But this top drawer, that's the gold. I'm like, all right, brilliant. And I managed to, get genuine weapons for about 5 or 6 of my figures. But yeah, they had literally a drawer for every type of weapon and hundreds and hundreds of them. So,
I mean, if someone turned up to a show with that now, I mean, like you could imagine the up.
Yeah.
And like they would be like demonized, and it would be all over social media, and it would be over forums and stuff like that. But it wasn't really the case back then. Equally, like I said, you know, I'm in no way defending or condoning what Anthony did, but he was never absolutely ripping people left, right and center off. All of his prices were always consistent, you know, like a snow trooper would be 45, 50 quid on every single eBay listing that he did. You know, he'd do like buy it nows, you know, and it'd just be like another one and another one. And it was like a bottomless supply, and all the General Mills stuff, you know, Empire carded bits and pieces. He wasn't asking like top dollar stuff, but what you then saw was all then the people who were then grading or just like flipping these things. Yeah. They were adding a premium onto those prices. They weren't selling them for the prices that Emshuers was selling them for. Right. He was the source of it, but, and I'm not saying that everybody's greed took over, but there was, you know, everybody was there was probably more of an outreach from the people that then sold these on, ever more so than Anthony himself, if that makes sense, because that he would be selling to distributors. Yeah. And then those distributors are going to shows. Those distributors are like, you know, doing eBay as well and stuff like that. So, and then those distributors are like locking onto AFA and UK graders and then going, well, look, if I get a 90 for this, I can then add a 20-30% premium on top, because I've got a guy in the States who just only buys 90s and things like that. So, you know, it's an unpopular thing to say, but like, you know, I think people, you know, we all kind of have to like hold our hands up and say, you know, times have changed and things like that. But like, if people were taking advantage of that, they kind of almost have to like go, yeah, you know, I'm sorry. I mean, I would have the occasional snow trooper, Hoth Stormtrooper, but like unknowingly, you know, but you just be like at 50 quid or whatever. It's like, it's so good, you know, and you just then sold it for 70 quid or whatever. But, you know, some people went quite deep into it, and some people, you know, would hoard these things because they're collecting them for their own collections and stuff like that. But I would say it pulled the wool over everyone. It'd make a great documentary or a movie, don't you think?
I do.
Let's make movies.
When do we think he got these card backs? Was it the early 90s? Was it part of the closure of the Palitoy factory that he would have got these off the back of? Because there's a name of a guy, Arthur, I think it's Arthur Bailey, who sold them, or who's trying to sell them, and Tony bought them, but I know Jason was vying for them as well. Would that have been early 90s?
It probably was, yeah. I mean, what I don't know, and I don't know if anybody else has got, if these were from the printers. Okay. Rather than like from a Palitoy factory. I mean, going back to like our earlier discussion about the landfill, there's a buck to be made. You know, people are out there like trying to like get whatever they can for these. I think with respect to Jason, at that point in time, he was a huge collector and a huge buyer. He also had Off-World, you know, a couple of the stores with Off-World. So he would have been picking up on deals and closeouts. He was also running like Empire Day, so he might have been thinking, well, you know, that might be something that's cool to like sell at those shows in the early days of the Falcon Society. So it's not like there was like an underground thing. It was probably more like stuff was being offered up, and it's like the opportunity there for someone to like get hold of these things. Not necessarily like, oh yeah, I've got a whole production line that I can make my own figures or anything like that. It was just like, there's this stuff, you know, do you want it or not? And there's, you know, again, going back to that point in time, there's limited demand for it. You know, it's dead cool, and we all go like, oh wow, now. But like, you know, honestly, there's like limited demand. You know, what are you going to do with this stuff? You know, how are you going to do it? And it's fair to say that where Anthony probably pipped Jason to the finish line on getting that, Anthony definitely played the long game on this and resisted the urge of like selling those cards individually as proof cards, you know, or not proof cards, unused card backs. There's a fundamental difference, you know, and people always like go, oh, you know, but it's just an unused card back. There is a big difference there. But he resisted the urge for doing that. He really played the long game on that, which is quite an incredible thing. And he also perfected the way of mounting these things to the card back so that it wasn't being identified by any graders or any collectors, you know.
And what do we think he did there? Because there was going back to Jason's original post, he mentioned in that post and this might have just been him clutching at straws, was that, you know, he potentially went back to the Palitoy factory and had them seal the cards to the bubbles. But it doesn't feel like that's necessarily true, because there's a lot of evidence that the presses that they were using on the genuine figures don't equate to what you see on a Toni, i.e. the impression on the back of the card. So it feels like there's definitely, something homemade being done with those cards as opposed to something industrial.
100%. There's a clear difference. When you've seen enough of these things, the Toni seals are no way as impregnated onto the card as the factory seals are. I mean, they're both like smooth seals, but you can see a clear difference between a factory seal and, what we talk about as a Toni seal. There is a difference. But what I will also say is, I mean, I currently have one and one suspects, in my collection, and they're still perfectly sealed to the card. There's no signs of them lifting or anything. They're still totally fine.
Yeah. I would say, a lot of research was probably done, and then the homework was clear. First of all, to go back to the factory, that's assuming that they still got that equipment there, which they probably haven't, or it's been repurposed or been yacht because things have moved on. Secondly, you'd have to have that number of figures to then mount on there, which again, nobody would really have, You're going
to do it to order, basically.
Yeah,
whatever you get hands on at the time.
What we've got here is a heat press.
Yeah.
Which is for Chloe, where she's a graphic designer. She does her own freelance work for signage and things like that. And we have a heat press that allows us to do like t-shirts, but you can then change the mounting plate on these things. So you can then use it to do caps, and you can use it to do mugs. Yeah. You can change the actual, almost like the coupling to the hot plate. Now that hot plate, you could even change that hot plate to have a cavity in it that would hold a bubble. And so that you're laying it over, you just put the heat, and when you're doing the t-shirts, for example, you're setting the timer. So it goes down, and then when it hits the right temperature, it goes beep, which then tells you to like lift up the waffle.
Yeah.
Because it knows it's like sealed it off. All you got to do is just go through and then work out the right temperature to melt that onto a thing that is then like I'm convinced it's a heat press with a cavity. They're just clamping down the heat press. So if you think of like a sandwich maker, like that, then you've set the you've worked out what is the right temperature to bond that onto the card, and also the length of time as well. So you're setting the temperature, you're setting the time. It's then telling you beep and done. You lift it up and you take it out. And within a factory, you're doing multiples at once. But I think this was just one at a time, because.
Would that work for something like with the stems on the bubble? Because I get what you're describing, but I've got a suspected Toy Toni. I've got it in my hand at the minute. So it's a Rebel Commander. And when I look at the seal on that, it just looks so uniform. I mean, even in between the stems of the bubble, along the top.
Yeah.
Would that work on there?
Yeah, because like I said, you can change the heat plate.
Yeah.
And you can change the mounting plate of what you're, be it a t-shirt, be it a cap.
So you can make that specific shape.
You can go to the manufacturers to say, look, I'm needing it for this, or I'm needing it for, you can buy off the shelf things, but I don't think this is something that's off the shelf. I think this is something that he probably saw, done his homework, understood the process, and then was like, right, well, I just need to get that thing made.
Mm.
Yeah. And all it is a plate. Yeah. So you're just getting someone to cut, a welder could probably do it. You just get someone, and then you fettle it down, and then you just mount that to it. So then the heating element is then just heating up that plate.
Mm.
You just pop the card. You put the bubble in the cavity. You put the card on top. You put down the waffle iron bit. It then beeps, and then you lift it up and take it out. And I think that is probably, there's all kinds of other stuff that's out there saying that he was using an ironing board, and that's bollocks. You can't do that on an ironing board with an iron.
You'd melt the bubble, wouldn't you, over time?
Yeah, and also the printing of the card itself, you know, it has a laminate on it as well. So you're going to be taking off the cardboard. So I think it was done with a t-shirt press with a plate that was probably custom made. And then, like you say, with the double stems, there might have been more than one plate because, like I say, all you do is you just unscrew it and you like mount it on just as you would do like, right, I now need to do a cup. I need to do the cap. I need to do whatever, you know, I'm melting like plastic vinyl onto.
Well, it's interesting actually regarding the double stem because there's another way of telling a genuine factory, seal. So some of them you see they've got a non-double stem bubble on the card. And if you look at the bottom, like the base, there's 2 gaps where they were using the same tool as if they had a double stem bubble because there's 2 gaps where the double stem would go. And you can clearly see, I've got a couple of genuine cards where there's 2 sort of gaps where there's no, you know, seal on those 2 gaps. And it's a double stem bubble. So that's another way of telling a genuine factory seal, you see. So, you've got that as well to always look out for.
Yeah. I mean, the hindsight now, you know, and the great work that the collecting community has gone into doing this, that is then documented and detailed. You know, we've got all of this information there. And like I said, you know, now it's like, well, it's obvious, isn't it? But like for years, this was, you know, and like I said, when you look at like the grading companies, you know, it's all the way to the very top. I don't think anybody for a second was questioning it.
But when you look at those little bits of evidence together, that's when it obviously started to untangle. I mean, I'd be interested to know what would happen if Jason hadn't lifted the lid when he did. Yeah, whether this would have come out by now. I think it would have done surely by now. With the amount of focus there is on vintage and everyone's eyes on it, so. it must have done.
But as I said before, it's a very unique thing because you're talking about a fake that's got all genuine parts to it. You know, that's why these grading companies were fooled because they were looking at genuine parts. The bubble was a genuine bubble. I mean, obviously we know now that, you know, bubbles were used by Tony or whoever, that weren't used in the factory. But the cards are genuine, the bubbles are genuine, and the figures are genuine. You know, they were mint figures that were being bought and put onto these cards. So it's quite a unique thing.
And in terms of quantities of cards, I've seen a couple of numbers banded around. I've seen 25,000 mentioned. I mean, is that a combination of cards and bubbles, or do we think he had 25,000 card backs? Any ideas on numbers?
I think the only person that could answer that question is Anthony. You know, I mean, you can speculate until the cows come home, but like your brain just hurts thinking about just how many are out there and how many still that people have got in their collections without even knowing. You know, because we all know each other. We have our networks, our social groups, you know, social media and forums and things like that and get-togethers. But there's still plenty of people out there that will be none the wiser, that have got these things that they're like, oh, I love this. This is my pride and joy, without realizing, you know, it's got a
not what it is on the surface. But in terms of the Palitoy cardback specifically, my understanding is there were 4 affected that we know of anyways, Palitoy cardbacks. A 45C, which was the Empire Strikes Back, the last Empire Strikes Back card, the one without the Palitoy logo.
And that's the 45B. The 45C is the first Jedi card.
Right, so the Jedi cards, which are only Star Wars and Empire figures and no Jedi figures on those card backs.
Yes.
And then the 45B, there were a few of those as well though, isn't there?
Yeah,
there's a few handful of figures on that.
Affected. Yeah, you've got like a TIE fighter pilot, a Chewbacca and a Bossk on those.
And then there were the 65Ds.
Yeah.
Everyone. And they were the bandolier offer figures, and
that was C-3PO. That was the other one he always had, like, C-3PO. So again, when you think about it, there's always baggies of those C-3POs.
Yes. Yeah.
And like I said, when you just kind of like, oh, well, it's obvious, isn't it? It's like, no.
Yeah. And I'm just looking up what the other one was. What was the other card back? There was one more 65 variant as well, wasn't there? So there's I think the 4 card backs, but in total, there were like 23 figure card back combinations that were affected. And I don't think that number's changed since 2014. The last time I saw that number, 23 mentioned, was back then. And when I've looked at it again today on Variant Villains, where they've got a Toy Toni summary from Jason, which I'm assuming is relatively new, there haven't been any more discoveries of any further figure combinations that have been uncovered. Certainly on Palitoy anyways.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. And when you think of how many Palitoy card back figure combinations there are across the entire range, which is like more than 500, you're only talking a very small number of card backs variants that are actually affected by this.
Yes.
So yeah, and I think that probably leads on then. Now we've kind of established what happened and what things were affected. What was the reactions for all this, John? What was, when this came a tumble back in late 2013 on a cold December night, what was the initial reaction from that?
Yeah, I mean, it's natural to be a very negative reaction because, you think you've got something and it's turned out to be something different. So yeah, people would have felt, they've been sort of had over and it didn't go down well, especially for people that had, heavily invested in a lot of this stuff. I mean, Jaden Smith comes to mind, obviously. I mean, he had quite a focus of the AFA 90 graded Jedi carded figures, I think. They all turned out to be, suspects. So obviously he would have been hit very hard by that. Probably one of my best friends in the hobby, a chap called Lee Gregory, who's not really involved much anymore, but the timing was rotten. I mean, this was literally weeks before the story broke. He decided to invest directly with Toni, and I think he spent a good £1,500 in some nice, German carded figures and stuff, because that was all in such good condition. And so he was pretty gutted by that. And I think, people just wanted to sort of get rid of the stuff as quickly as possible.
I know Grant took it really bad because I think his dad had bought him a Boba Fett from Toni. So he took that quite, it's not only is he ripping off, the community and his friends, but he also, hoodwinked his dad the way that he saw it as well.
Yeah.
So people took it really personally.
They did. Yeah, definitely. And understandably. I mean, I personally, I think it's, you want to say every serious collector has or has either had a Toni in their collection at some point, I'm sure. I had just a small handful, but as Dave said earlier, what didn't make it sting so bad for me personally was what I'd paid for them. I mean, and some of these things, they were hard to come by. So I remember buying directly from Toni, Jedi carded Gamorrean Guard, which is a toughie. And I mean, this thing was pristine mint when it arrived, and I think it only cost me the best part of 40 quid. So I wasn't overly bothered by that. And I also got a logo from him for maybe even 30 quid, a bit less. And, what I loved about the logo was that where, what we know now, genuine factory examples, that they're all pretty much yellow bubbled, but the Toni example was a clear bubble, which
I did note that. Is that a giveaway then for a clear bubbled low-grade?
Well, it's very
unheard of.
Yeah. It's very difficult to find. I mean, certainly
there is. I know. You don't tell me about it. Mine is like I've been smoking 20 a day for the last 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah. They're horrendous and they look terrible because you've got a lovely blue cold colour and the colour clash with the yellow bubble is awful. So, I mean, I actually, funny enough, I held on to my Tonis until recently, and I sold my Toni low grade for 100 quid, and I managed to find a genuine factory example with a clear bubble, and that also cost me about 100 quid. So if people had held on to their Tonis for a bit, they probably would have done all right, because a year or so ago I sold my Leia Bouche. I got 350 quid for that Toni. That cost me the best part of 100 quid a few years ago when I bought it from Toni directly. And his examples, they came with a wrong shaped bubble. As we know, the genuine factory has got like a little separate bit for the helmet.
Yeah.
Tony's bubble was just a straight, tall, long single stem bubble. You know, it was a lovely thing. And I mean, I just, because of what it cost me, I wasn't overly bothered to get rid of it. And as I say, I did get a genuine factory example, like a mint one. And I sold my Tony for like more than 3 times what I paid for it. So
did well then out of it. But I mean, in terms of what was going on at the time, obviously eventually, you know, people were getting upset. There was talk of legal action. Did anything ever come of that? You know?
I did have a brief word with Jason Smith about it, and he reckons no, nothing came of it in the end. I guess they didn't have the evidence there to do anything with it. And
basically Tony went to ground, didn't he? I think there was a couple of responses he gave initially.
Yeah.
And then I think when he realised, he wasn't going to be able to
he didn't say anything else. Yeah. And there was that Fake Britain episode.
Yes.
Which was actually horrendous, because the editing in that, I mean, that would imply that nearly all the cars were affected, including American Kenneth cars. That's just not the case. That was really, I mean, the bits that Jason spoke in, they were spot on. That was fine, but it's just the editing.
Just an unfamiliarity with the subject. We're not, obviously we're too geeky for the mainstream.
Well, this is it. Well, you know, yeah, exactly. You know,
I suppose the bit that was interesting in that for me, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I haven't watched it for a while, was when they went to that guy's house and he kind of had all these graded stuff laid out, and it was like, that's a Tony, that's a Tony. Yeah. And just, you could see the guy's face, you know, it was devastating for people.
Yeah, because he'd really gone for high-end stuff, and he obviously paid out a fair bit of money, so it must have been, you know, really tough for him to
and especially when, you know, it was being bandied about at the time that, you know, someone was using a steam iron to do this.
Yeah.
It does make it feel that, you know, someone's in their garage with their, you know, ironing board set up, ironing these things on. But I think there was, you know, from what we just described, and I think what you can see, you know, on the card backs we probably held in our own hands, there was a lot more to it than someone using a Tefal iron to put these things on. You know, I joined this forums in, I think it was, February 2014, and it was just on fire. You know, every time there was someone on eBay trying to sell one without declaring it as a Tony, they were getting torn down. There was, you know, just a real anger about it back then. Obviously there was lots of podcasts going on at the time and people were talking about it, and, you know, people were really furious about it, and rightly so. But it definitely feels that, you know, in the past few years, things have calmed down a bit, and I'll bring you in now, Pete. Do you want to give us a bit of a flavour on how things have evolved over the last 10 years and where the market is now for these items?
Yeah, it does seem to have suffered. I sort of missed this. So when I was collecting first, I was buying loose figures from him, and like you mentioned it earlier, Dave, just put a check in the post and then 2 weeks later the box would turn up. You just put your faith in that it would happen. So I was only buying loose from him, but he must have been selling carded at the time, but I never got involved at that level. And when I came back in, sort of 2015 or so, it just blown up. So I was reading all about it and just thinking, wow, these bonkers, pages and pages and pages in forum. But yeah, time is a great healer, right? What, we're 10 years on, and these things have just got taken on a different life of their own. I guess we covered it, but if they were 40, 50 quid at the time, which is still an investment, but if you sat on them and you're looking at them now, they're going beyond that, and people are focusing on them. Dean Edwards has got quite a collection of them, and people are going after them. So, but they're rare. Some of the combinations are rare. Some of the card backs are rare. They're all genuine parts. They're just immaculate. So if you're just only looking for placeholders, or you're looking for nice looking carded figures, they're out there. Yeah, it's moved on a long way. I guess the value of all of where vintage has gone compared to where it was has had a big effect on it. Oh, the view definitely has changed.
I mean, that unique combo with the FET that he did with the, you know, the tri-logo FET on Jedi card. I mean, I paid probably about 200 quid for mine, and I mean, the figure on its own is worth more than that. A mint tri-logo FET. I was more than happy to keep that, because I used to have an actual tri-logo carded tri-logo FET, and I let that go, and you know, to replace that today would be a small fortune. So I'm more than happy to keep the Tony with the tri-FET on the card. You know, I think that's quite a nice figure.
I mean, these go back a few years. I mean, there's a few Tonys that have gone up for sale that have been declared as Tonys. So yeah, there's Gamorrean Guard, that's gone for 350 quid. What we got? I'm looking on just on some of the history in Jabba's court, because they allow the sales of them. I suppose that's the other point, that there's still groups that frown upon them. I know Echo are quite finicky about which ones they allow to be posted. I think there's obviously suspect ones that are out there, and they don't always, they're declared as possible Tonys, but if it's declared an outright Tony, I don't think they necessarily stand for it.
No, they don't.
And I know the IC, is it the ICC? Is that how you call it? He's, old Michael Havens, he's dead against them still as well over in the States.
But the auction houses do, like Vector's put them through, they'll put a description. I don't think they'll actually describe it as a toy Tony.
Right. No, not until they're told. These so-called, auction experts, they're not really cracked up to be, some of them, to be honest.
They just describe it as made of genuine parts, but not necessarily assembled in the factory or that kind of stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, there's quite a few fets on eBay as well that have been declared as Tonys, and they've gone for over £1,000.
Yeah. Incredible. Yeah.
So, people are willing to spend the money on it. I mean, how much was he, can anyone remember how much he would used to sell fets for?
When I was involved, I remember for the standard fet on the Jedi card, he wanted 140 quid. And for the tri-logo fet on the Jedi card, he wanted 200 quid. Those are the prices I remember.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember, like, the Hoth Stormtrooper would be around about 45 to 55 quid.
Yeah.
The 3POs would be always about 40 quid. The Meccano Jawas were always about 90 quid, which again, even though that's not one of the things under the spotlight, that's an incredible price. Like a Meccano square card Jawa, like 90 quid. But yeah, I remember the fets being sort of like 125 thereabout.
Let's say, right.
And up. I mean, anything that was like a General Mills card was like, normally, right, 100 quid.
Yeah.
You had the Hammerheads, you had Rebel Commanders, like the TIE Fighter pilots and things like that. But, anything like that. But anything Jedi was like under 100 quid, except for the fet, really.
So I found a couple more now. So this game is another one, a Chewbacca Toy Toni on an Empire card. Looks like one of the Germans one. That's sold about a year and a half ago. That went for 400 quid. There's a Stormtrooper that sold around the same time. That went for 360 quid. That was on the German ESV card. We've got another Palitoy Chewbacca this time. This was in 2022, went for 275. Yeah. So yeah, they're still, making good money. But I remember at the time, like I said, I just joined the forums and I was putting together my Empire run. And I think I mentioned on the last show, like Han Besbin was one I really wanted to get, and I managed to get it on the Kenner card, but it wasn't the best. The bubble was yellow and I wanted a better one. And I saw someone selling a Tony one on eBay, although it wasn't necessarily, it was a possible Tony. It clearly was, on a German card back. And I remember getting it and just thinking this thing, it looked beautiful. It was better than the majority of the cards that I had. I think it was about 50 quid, but I just couldn't accept it into my collection at that time. So I sent it back to the seller, and I regret that now. Because it was so good.
Yeah, feelings have definitely changed, that's for sure.
And in my collection now, I've talked through it a couple of times, so I've got a Rebel Commander, which I did, I sold my Kenner one off because I saw this one come up, but it is, again, it's on a German card, but it's the only one I've got, and it's almost a part of history now, isn't it, of Palitoy collecting, and I just feel like I needed one in my collection almost to tell that, when you're putting your collection together, just to be able to tell the story of the range, to have one in there, it's part of the, I suppose, the legacy now of the time.
Actually, I remember now, there was one, it did sting a bit at the time. It was a little while before the story broke. Dectis held an auction, and in the auction there was a graded Jedi carded Yoda Palitoy, which is very tough. And I really wanted that, and I put in an early bid of 500 quid for it. And another very famous Palitoy collector by the name of Peter Routledge, he put in the same bid on this figure, but he put the bid in a couple of weeks after I did, and it ended up at that price. So I won it because I put the bid in first. We met at one of the fair events. I think it was one of the memorabilia shows, and he said to me, he said, look, he said, if you ever want to let it go, I'm your man. He said, just tell me what you want for it and I'll pay you for it. Then the story broke. He was obviously no longer interested in the Yoda. Now I wasn't, I wasn't in a hurry to let it go because I knew that was tough, Tony or no Tony. I mean, now we look at the list now, with the work Jason's done, and there are only 12 on that list. So, I mean, I held on to it because I liked it. And I did end up, I was trying to upgrade my Yodas to like earlier cards, and I think within a year I managed to get a hold of a 41 back. So I sold the Jedi one, and I mean, I got $750 for it quite quickly. I listed it on eBay. Known to a few people, but he doesn't really go in the limelight. He's not on the forums or anything, but he's got a serious collection. He bought that from me. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't mind having that today, because I've never managed to get a hold of another Jedi card of Yoda since, and it was a nice thing, it was a nice piece. So yeah.
What about you, Pete? Have you ever had any of these in your collection?
No. Lucky I kind of avoided it, but just got the list in front of me. It's amazing. It just kind of it's amazing how much he had. He's looking at some of the numbers, and then you sort of flip that, and then you sort of realize how much carded stuff is out there. I mean, beyond this is just what he managed to get at the end of it, out of the factory or out of the printers, and that was just sort of sitting there, and you just see how much has gone through, like, legitimately. It's amazing. Where are they now? Where are the card backs?
Well, if we'll get on to that in a second. Dave, what if I take it you've ended up with a few of these in your lap as well when this all kicked off?
Yeah, I've got a Yoda, a General Mills Yoda.
On a Jedi card. I know someone who might be interested in that.
Genuinely, I can't even remember. But I think it's an Empire card. No. I think I got a Han Hoth, again, on a General Mills. I think Rebel Commander. There's probably about 3 that I've got. And to be honest, and it doesn't bother me because, they weren't going anywhere anyway. Yeah. A bit like what John was saying, you, when you've got these things, if you're happy with it, then I'm not saying that's the be all and end all. And I know that there's, certainly an ethical question, things like that. But if you're happy with it, the alternative is unobtainable for me anyway, because I would sooner spend that money on something else. So I'm at peace with it. And I'm pretty sure my Meccano Jawa was from him. I know I spoke on the previous episode, the Tri-Logo Luke Bespin I bought from him, that I sold a couple of years ago. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I might have notes of what I bought from who, what, where, somewhere. But yeah, the ones that I've got, I know I didn't buy from him anyway. They would have been through trades with other people. I remember Mark Carraway was the Han Hoth because at that point in time he was kind of just getting rid of stuff, and that was at a memorabilia. But yeah, they're cool looking things. And that's not condoning it,
Right.
Don't do it, kids. The way I look at things is very different to a lot of other people, and I'm not in it for the competitive sake. I'm in it for my own self-gratification.
But I do think that there's an argument for that, that they're out there, they're not going away. People are going to start burning these things, and I think that making people aware of them is the most important piece of this now. And
no one is ever gonna go, you know what, this is bad, I'm gonna buy as many of these. You get the occasional person who wants to try and make a point, but there is no point to be made because the information is out there, and all you're doing is just being pious about something and destroying something that is a drop in the ocean to what is actually out there. It doesn't make a blind bit of difference because there's so many of what we're aware of, let alone what is undocumented. You know, it's completely crazy. So the protest that someone is making is completely irrelevant, really. And like you say, the best you can do is make that information available. But the reality is there's going to come a point when we're all dead. and that information ain't going to be there. And so they are going to be circulated around again.
Yeah.
You know, if you think of people's attention spans now compared to 10, 20 years ago, what are they going to be in another 10, 20 years? You know, they're not going to be looking up these things. You know, everybody's sitting on a gold mine. It's worth £1 million, you know, and what have you. And so there is going to be a point, even though the supply is going to exceed the demand, but there is going to be a point of these things are going to be circulating around under the incorrect pretenses because, you know, we're not going to be there championing these things. You know, Dan, you're not going to be there saying you need to listen to the Q2 podcast 2025.
I'm going to live forever, mate. I don't know about you.
Continuing in Q3 2025. You know, you got to sort of like look at the bigger picture.
But when you look today at what people are paying for, like I think John mentioned on the last show about some of the stuff that gets sold on eBay and how much it goes for, you know, you've got bubbles hanging off cards, footers missing and, you know, just standard stuff people are paying so much for. And then when you look at these Tonys, beautiful card backs.
Yeah.
For the most part, they've been sealed well. What certainly my experience, the ones that I've handled have been well sealed. And people talk about them being glued. Oh, it's just the glue that's foreign. I don't even think there's glue involved. Like you say, they've been heat sealed. Yeah. The glue in the plastic's been activated and it's been attached to the card.
Yeah.
Everything there is legit. And if you sat down to anyone who wasn't, you know, invested in this like we were and said, well, this is a fake. Well, why is it fake?
Yeah.
Bloke got a heat press and pressed it down and it could have been pressed in the factory. I mean, look, it's still fraud, it's still naughty, but to the layman, and this is probably why it's not gone any further, if you took it to the police station, they'd probably start laughing at you. To be fair, it just doesn't care about this stuff. But the money that's changed hands that's painful over it and the subterfuge.
The thing that's happening, I dare say, and I don't have any evidence or proof to back up this claim, but because it's almost had a renaissance in itself and they're going for good money, I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's still going on, but just under a different guise.
Well, we mentioned Tony resurfaces on eBay and he's I think he's over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, his eBay page, and I have got him as a safe seller and I do check in every now and then. I've never bought anything from him, but just to see how active he is. He is getting braver with what he's putting up there. So you are seeing a few mint on cards, none of the affected card backs, but he will chuck a few try logos up and various other bits and pieces, but he's definitely still out there. And Pete, I know Pete, you alluded to it a minute ago, was if he has got stock left over and he does feel that people have kind of warmed to this, if someone contacted him through eBay and said, you know, I know you are, and I know you used to do this, I don't care, I really actually appreciate what you were putting out, do you think he'd be tempted to start up again?
I don't think he would.
No.
I think put it like this. You got someone who's literally done the long con on this.
Yeah.
It's you know, it is actually incredible. It is absolutely incredible. The patience and the perseverance and the dedication to that you wouldn't give it away so quickly. You know, because you know what Star Wars collectors are now like. You are not gonna like answer any kind of email, but you would then be aware that these things are retaining values. And, you know, and in a bizarre way, we're adding to that by talking about it in this way. But then you just make that con happen again, but in a different way. Some other, you know, just, and you have your eBay account active, but like not selling any of those things. So you can say, well, look, I'm not doing any of this. But then you could be having, you know, a different filter or a different business address and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, we've been duped so well that it wouldn't surprise me if now that the cat's out the bag, that's like, well, this is all okay, you know, as long as it's disclosed what it is, I can still get, you know, a couple of £100 for these things. But it's not me that's doing the disclosing, it's under some other name.
Well, I think German card backs, when you talk about the General Mills stuff, I think they are properly tainted because of this. And the first thing I think of whenever I see one of those card backs is, that's Tony, automatically, without even thinking, you know, and without even really knowing if it was an affected card back or not. I just automatically revert to that. So I think he's definitely tainted that market. And that definitely, from, you know, looking at the list he's got, that was the lion's share of what he had. Certainly with Empire cards.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the leftover card backs, do you think there'll come a day when they resurface? I mean, maybe, you know, when he passes away, is he gonna leave them to someone, or all of a sudden we're gonna have, that will be the, you know, the next step of the story. If we'll actually, there is a suitcase left of card backs, and let's start auctioning them off as unused card backs, get them graded, and all of a sudden that's the next big craze in collecting.
Yeah, what generation is he? How old?
I think he's quite elderly, isn't he?
Honestly, I have no idea.
He's been around for a while.
He's into tin plate toys, so if you look at that's like a 50s, 60s type thing.
I thought it's probably in his 70s or 80s potentially.
And if he was a dealer in the 90s, you know, that's 30 years ago. So even if he was in his 20s then, he's in his 50s now, but like he's into tin plate toys, so like...
But he's given up his stall at Snooper's Paradise down in Brighton. That's no longer there, so maybe just.
The next generation could probably sell them and just say that this is what's happened. I found them. And...
Exactly, yeah. But he doesn't obviously. If he's worried the law's going to come after him and it's going to kind of prove his guilt, there might be more of a case then to prosecute him and try and compete with people who've really still got a passion for getting that money back and punishing him for it. Then they're gonna take full advantage of that.
But again, that comes back to like, what are they what are they getting him for? Is he the one selling them for hundreds of thousands of pounds when, you know, there are...
Well, I think it's the fact he sold them at all, mate. It's the hurt and the pain that he's caused a lot of people.
I totally get that, but he's almost been lumped in entirely within that when, you know, he wasn't necessarily grading them and what have you. Well, that's not to say he wasn't sending stuff off to grading, but where I'm coming from is that I think that what I was trying to say earlier, that I think all traders have to kind of put their hands up and say, we were then, you know, inflating, you know, buying them because they were easily and readily available, and then just chucking a premium on top and then selling them on. That really is something that's not really ever kind of owned up to. I mean, you know, it is an uncomfortable subject for a lot of people, and not everybody wants to be completely honest and transparent about those things. You know, there's not really anything you can do about it.
I think that's the point. And I don't want people to listen to this and think that we're condoning any of it, because it was better than it never happened. You know, what a great world we'd live in if it hadn't. And he was, you know, those card backs, much like the Return of the Jedi proof cards, and again, these aren't proof cards. But what a great world when we live in, where you could own one of those on your shelf in a nice bit of acrylic, as a, you know, almost a, you know, pre-production, but you know what I mean, just something that's out of the factory.
Was just kept pure and left alone, and that would have been amazing.
And he could have probably made today. He would have made absolute bomb out of those, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he would.
Nah, I don't think so. Not if there's 20,000. They'd be like worthless.
But not in it. But you don't know.
How much Kenner stuff there is? There's shitloads of Kenner, and it goes for big money because you've got the people to buy it. You know, I think
if he'd tried to sell them in the 90s, like you say, Dave, there probably wouldn't have been the audience for them. But
no,
if he'd have been drip feeding them out, you know, and to point today, I think that, you know, I'd quite fancy one of those.
I think he would have been called out sooner if he'd been drip feeding them out as unused cards, because people would be like, what the fuck is the deal with this? You know, like, how have you got another one? I think he got away with it for the length of time that he did, but he just, you know, it was more plausible to say that he's just got like cases and cases of these things, rather than like, I'm assembling stuff like that. And that's what I mean. He's an incredible con. And and where I talk about these things, if anybody's like listening, 100%, I'm not condoning any of it. It literally just is like, there's sometimes where
it's related to 2025, isn't it?
Yeah, you gotta go, yeah, man, we were all duped. And being angry about these things doesn't kind of get you anywhere now. You gotta like take from these lessons and learn from it. And it won't be the first time and it won't be the last time when it comes to like toy collecting. There's all kinds of scams going on, and like there's things that are getting more and more sophisticated. Social media is playing a part in that, with people, posting up pictures of stuff that isn't actually theirs for sale, and like friends and family payments and things like that. There's always scams going on, and sadly everybody, will from time to time get burnt. The best thing we can do is just have the open discussion about it, inform as many people. The more that people learn and get informed by this, the less likely you are to get caught out by it. And that's where that hurt really came about, is because everybody was taken in by it.
Yeah.
Like now, it's not so much the case. We can talk about it. The information is collated. Jason Smith's done a phenomenal job trying to like put all this into some kind of digestible amount. It's in the eco guides. The information is out there. The more that people can get educated by this stuff, the better it is for everybody and as a collector. But like, it's just mad. The more you think about it.
It could be a film. It could be a film. Someone needs to write the script, Dave.
Yeah, I would say let's do the Grey Limbed Stormtrooper first. So you kind of like open up, because everybody's kind of interested in the first.
Yeah.
Then you follow it up then with like the,
Palitoy Landfill.
You follow up, but then the real pièce de résistance you have, like, the Anthony Emshowitz story, if you think about it, it's got like the toys that made us, written all over it, these kind of like toy scandals, and you just be like, oh, wow.
Yeah. It is amazing.
And make it a quality podcast. It's like, it's amazing.
Good job I do the edit on this, isn't it? What did you say, Dave?
In recent years, vintage toys based on characters in the hugely successful Star Wars films have become highly collectible. These boxed figures now often sell for hundreds of pounds, and the very rare ones sell for thousands. But there's a disturbance in the world of Star Wars collectibles. This figure, and thousands like it, are not what they appear to be. Dark forces have been at work.
So we've come to the end of another episode of Generation Skywalker are back, and we've got loads of exciting shows coming up. Jess has been hard at work on our Andor series in the lead up to season 2, which we've been lucky enough to have Barry Ginjal join us on. Barry's worked as graphic designer on both season 1 and season 2 of Andor, and has appeared on the screen as Anton Krieger, and he gives us loads of behind the scenes insight into what went into producing the show. Stu has recently put out a new episode of The Modern Way, and we have a new episode of Those Old Fossils planned for the coming weeks. Plus, we might just have a Sith-related surprise in store for May the 4th. And if you still need more Generation Skywalker in your life, we have over 130 past shows in our back catalogue, as well as the 4 previous episodes of the Palitoy Guides. There are Disney Plus show reviews where we give our takes on Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi, Ahsoka. We've got commentaries, modern collectible talk on The Modern Way, and vintage talk on Those Old Fossils. And let's not forget our committee shows. It's always great to hear Jez get upset when he doesn't get his own way. On social media, we're most active on Instagram and Facebook. Just search Generation Skywalker to find us. And if you want to chat with hosts and other listeners, join our We Are Generation Skywalker Facebook group. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard, please give us a 5-star review. It means a whole lot to us and helps promote the show to others. So with that, fellas, I will say good night. Oh, no. I've got one more thing to talk. So, Dave, you've been digging me out about Quality Show. I don't know if we're going to achieve that, but I've got an idea for episode 6.
Go on.
Episode 6. So we've been talking, I think for the sake of our listener, this show and part 4 were all meant to be one show. I was so over ambitious. There was no way we were going to do it as one show. So it did get split into 2, but the one bit we haven't recorded yet was the Palitoy puzzler piece. So I was thinking about that the other day while I was driving, and we've obviously got Brian's book coming out, and when I interviewed him, I asked him a few of the puzzlers' and said, is that in the book? And did you cover any of this or that? And I've got a feeling there might be a few grains in that book in terms of answering some of those puzzlers. So I'm going to suggest we come back later this year, once the book's out, we've had a chance to have a look at it, go through the puzzlers as we were, but also try and do it through the lens of Total Star Wars Toys, the Palitoy saga, and see if there's any answers in there, and do a little review of the book at the same time. How does that sound?
Well, but like, we got 2 more episodes before that one.
Yeah, you crack on. You crack on, Dave. I'll tell you what, if you guys have come up with enough material and put it into our little chat, we'll do another one before then. But that's my plan for part 6.
Sounds good.
With that, we will say good night. So it's good night from Pete.
Night, guys.
It's good night from John.
Right, guys, it was a pleasure as always.
And Dave, I'm really disappointed, mate. I'm massively disappointed because I'm not going to get to use my Action Man drop in this episode. You haven't said Action Man once. Good night, Dave.
You can't say Palitoy without oi.
And a special thanks to Lee Bullock for his time talking to us about the Grey Limbed Hoth Stormtroopers. I'm Dan Burgess, and we're Generation Skywalker. All errors, all passions, all Star Wars.
From Palitoy.